The heart of Moscow often echoes with the footsteps of power and history. Yet, today, a new scene unfolds, a quiet invasion of human beings from thousands of miles away. Imagine a flood of Indian workers filing through the gates of the immigration office, their faces tense, carrying hopes and fears. Can you hear the hum of voices, the clatter of shoes on cold pavement, the smell of unfamiliar spices lingering in the air? But what if I told you this is just the beginning of something far darker? Recent footage reveals a staggering sight: over 10,000 migrants queued in front of Moscow's immigration centers. This isn't just coincidence, it's a meticulously planned move by Kremlin strategists. Today, the official count stands at 27,000 Indian workers, yet the streets suggest the number is rapidly rising. Is this enough to sustain Russia's battered economy? Certainly not. With hundreds of thousands needed, what sacrifices are being made? Underneath the surface, a conflict brews. While Russian soldiers are sent to fight in Ukraine, the country's factories and streets are filling with a new wave of laborers from afar. Promised sky-high salaries, up to 100,000 rubles monthly, these workers are lured by dreams of prosperity. But with inflation gnashing at the ruble's value, is this promise real or illusion? The smell of boiling spices in cramped corridors, piles of shoes on the floor, and the dense hum of conversation tell a story of desperate adaptation. This immersion isn't temporary. Dormitories are morphing into miniature Delhi, with narrow hallways turned into kitchens, walls echoing with chants of home. It's as if a new cultural chapter is being written inside Russia's historic heart. Yet, beneath this seemingly mundane migration lies a terrifying secret. The Kremlin's ambitions push beyond economic necessity. Rumors swirl that some of these Indian workers aren't just building bridges or working in fields, they're being sent directly to the front lines of the war. Sources from France 24 and independent witnesses speak of workers who sign contracts with no idea they'd face combat. In some recordings, Indian men reveal chilling truths: many have lost friends, many are missing, and most know their fate hangs by a thread. One voice trembles as he admits, "We all fear how this will end." Could it be that behind the promise of wages lies a dark arrangement to fill war casualties? In the trenches of Ukraine, the horrors unfold. Scenes of young men, fresh faces, thrust into chaos, many never return. The Indian government, it seems, turns a blind eye. The price of this forced migration? Lives lost in distant trenches, their families left behind, unaware of the true cost. How did it come to this? Is the dream of prosperity worth the bloodshed? As these stories intertwine, a haunting question remains: is Russia's gamble on imported labor the future of its survival, or the beginning of its undoing? Amidst the clash of steel and the cries of war, an unsettling truth emerges, one that challenges the very notion of power, loyalty, and sacrifice. What will be the cost of this quiet war for survival? Russia's labor shortage has become a crisis, yet the government's solution is startling. Imagine hundreds of thousands of workers ready to fill the void. Now, picture this: thousands of Indian migrants pouring into Moscow and St. Petersburg, promising a monthly salary of 100,000 rubles, about $1,240. This isn't just a paycheck, it's a lifeline for a struggling economy. But with the ruble's value depleting and inflation surging, can these promises truly be kept? Looming behind these promises is a growing influx, an estimated 40,000 more Indian workers expected in just 2 years. Official figures may show 27,000 current workers, but insiders warn that this is just the beginning. The highest levels of government seem to endorse this plan, seeing it as a way to rebuild the economy, much like Dubai's model of rapid migrant-driven growth. Yet the real story isn't on paper, it's beneath the surface, hidden in the cramped dormitories of Russian cities. In these living spaces, the transformation is undeniable. Corridors have turned into bustling tiny marketplaces, stoves crackle, spices fill the air, and the sense of familiar dishes mingle with the echoes of hurried footsteps. Shoes pile in chaotic stacks as Indian workers cook their traditional meals in narrow hallways. It's a new cultural mosaic transforming the heart of Russia's capital, a silent sign of how deep this migration runs. But what's the price of this workforce? The truth is more disturbing. Are these new arrivals simply laborers, or are they being unwitting pawns in a far darker game? Reports suggest some are being sent directly to the front lines in Ukraine.
With Russia's own soldiers depleted by war, foreign workers, often unaware of the risks, are being dispatched into the horrors of combat zones.
Shocking footage shows Indian workers confessing that many have lost their lives or gone missing in the dreadful trenches of Donetsk. One young man's words echo in the silence, "We all know how this will end." Their hopes for a better life have turned into nightmares of death and despair.
Contracted under the guise of industrial jobs, they found themselves on the most dangerous battlefield, untrained and unprepared.
The grim truth emerges from their stories. The Russian army, desperate for manpower, has used these migrants as disposable pawns. In places like Pokrovsk, the line between work and war has blurred. Young Indians, lured by promises of income, are now fighting in a bloody war zone, painfully aware that they were sent there with minimal training, no support, just the cold grip of death awaiting.
This reality raises a haunting question: is the Kremlin sacrificing its future for geopolitical leverage?
While Putin's government benefits from cheap labor and a hidden military reserve, India's young workforce bears the cost, life or death, often blind to the true price they pay. Their journeys began with hopes of a new beginning but now threaten to end in tragedy, buried in trenches far from home.
The story's shock waves ripple beyond borders. As foreign workers vanish in Ukraine's hellish landscape, the truth becomes impossible to ignore.
Behind the smiling faces in busy corridors lies a dark and tragic secret, a story of deception, sacrifice, and silent suffering in the shadows of one of the world's most powerful nations.
The migration crisis in Russia isn't just numbers, it's a story of desperate survival.
As Russian men are called to fight on the front lines, a new crowd has flooded Moscow and beyond.
These aren't just workers, they are the lifelines of an empire in decline.
In the cramped corridors of dormitories, the smell of spicy food mixes with the scent of exhaustion, transforming living spaces into bustling mini-markets. The corridors are lined with stoves, shoes pile up in disorder, and dozens of Indian workers prepare their traditional meals, creating an atmosphere that feels more like a bustling street market than a residential building. This isn't temporary housing, it's a transfer of entire communities, a cultural reshaping happening right in the heart of Russia's capital.
While the Kremlin touts political ideology, the reality whispers a different story.
The streets, factories, and dorms now hum with the voices of thousands brought from thousands of kilometers away. The original Russian narrative of unity is crumbling beneath the weight of pragmatic necessity.
Economic pressures reveal this migration isn't voluntary, it's vital for survival.
The figures tell part of the story.
The Kremlin announced a quota of 72,000 Indian workers, an illusion of control.
Yet, images and official data paint a different picture. The actual number has already surpassed this target, hidden behind bureaucratic reports. Over the past year, the Indian population in Russia has surged by 25%, with projections of doubling by 2025.
Deepening the crisis.
Experts suggest that up to 1 million Indian workers could be in Russia in the near future. This would be one of the largest coordinated efforts in modern history to replace a nation's workforce. The goal is crystal clear: fill the void caused by the declining Russian working-age male population and shattered industries.
But what is driving this sudden surge? Why is the labor market shaking to its core?
The answer lies in a devastating decline of Russian men available for work.
With their enlistment and losses in Ukraine, entire sectors, industry, textiles, construction, are spiraling into chaos.
Images from the Sverdlovsk region and Ivanova paint a stark picture. Factories rely heavily on Indian workers, essential cogs in Russia's economic machinery. At a textile factory in Ivanova, machinery groans with dependence on imported hands. Here, Russian industry is being quietly dismantled and replaced. The question is, how long can this silent crisis continue before the walls begin to crumble?
And amidst this chaos, darker truths simmer just beneath the surface.
Evidence emerges that some of these workers are being diverted from labor duties to the battlefield. Reports, witnesses, and footage suggest that Indian workers, promised safety and stability, are instead sent to the most brutal trenches of Ukraine. The sound of distant artillery, the scent of dust and death, these have become the new reality for many who came seeking a better life. In interviews, Indian workers reveal a harrowing truth: many have lost colleagues in combat, some never return. Their stories are warnings that the lines between industrial labor and warfare are perilously blurred.
Could this be the hidden cost of Russia's strategic covert operations? As the war drags on, the stakes grow darker. The promise of economic salvation is now intertwined with the sacrifice of countless young lives. The shadows lengthen, and the question remains, how deep does this conspiracy go? Will the imported workforce be enough to sustain Russia's hopes of resurgence, or are they unwitting pawns in a game that might destroy them all? The silence of the trenches may soon be broken by the ultimate shock. What happens when the very soldiers sent to fill the war's gaps are the ones who pay the highest price? As the Russian economy crumbles under the weight of war losses, pausing for a breath, imagine if your nation's pride dissolved into imported strangers, not soldiers but cheap labor. Is this Putin's hidden gamble, trading Russian identity for a flood of outsiders? A shocking twist reveals how this migration masks a darker truth: bodies shipped from factories to front lines. Can you stomach the reality of lives bartered in the shadows of the Kremlin? This story plunges into the heart of Moscow's crumbling workforce, where Indian migrants fill the voids, and whispers of war horrors emerge from Ukraine's mud. But wait, what if these workers aren't just cogs in the machine, but unwitting cannon fodder? Let's dive in, unraveling the threads of desperation, where factories hum with foreign echoes, and trenches claim the unwary. Continuing from Moscow's bustling lines where thousands of Indians queue for Russian visas, inflating the nation's labor force to unprecedented levels, we now shift to the gritty factories echoing with the clang of machinery in Sverdlovsk and Ivanovo. Here, the air reeks of oil and sweat as heavy industrial gears grind, foreign hands gripping levers once held by native sons. Who fills the silence of absent Russian men now battling at the front? A provocative jab: has Russia become so desperate that its superpower myth crumbles in these dust-choked halls? Twisting the narrative, these photos from Ivanovo's textile factories aren't mere snapshots, they expose total reliance on Indian workers to keep production lines whirring. Lines that Russia's own citizens abandoned. The tactile pull of rough fabrics under fingers, the constant whir of sewing machines, it's evidence of a massive gap: 800,000 job vacancies gaping in machinery, electronics, and construction, devouring replacements from afar. Yet, as factories burst profit from this influx, the true shock lurks elsewhere. What if this workforce isn't safe at all, but a secret reserve yanked into Ukraine's inferno? Pause, feel the chill of betrayal. Building on the factory floor tremors, where Indian migrants prop up Russian industry amid 800,000 vacancies, driven by dwindling native manpower, we descend into the murky revelations from Ukraine's trenches, where mud clings to boots and the stench of despair lingers. Independent sources whisper horrific tales of workers lured by paychecks, only to be thrust into battle without training. How does a promised wage turn into a death sentence? Shocking fact: allegations of thousands directed straight to front lines. Twist here, shift perspective: these aren't accidental slips, but intentional diversions by the Kremlin, exploiting post-sanctions desperation. Touch the bitter cold of unforgiving earth, hear the distant boom of artillery, smell the acrid smoke of conflict. A video emerges. Indian voices breaking the silence: I think we all know how this will end. Many sent to zones, many perished, many vanished. The Indian government, indifferent. This confession uncovers the Russian army's strategy, facing 1 million casualties and shortages. Treating imported workers as disposable pawns, masked as industrial hires. Now, envision a young man's tale, his friend lured by defense contracts, hungry for earnings. What happens next? In just 10 days, untrained, hurled into hell near Pokrovsk, one of 6 missing or dead, each breath a gamble in the mud. Rhetorical lash: does India's silence stain the trade deals? Cliffhanger dangles: if factories filled the gaps, what abyss swallows these men next? A heart-pounding betrayal, where visa promises evaporate in gunfire, painting Russia's struggle as a human trafficking shadowplay. Continuing from the previous revelation, a young Indian man in a video shared the chilling story of his friend lured by promises of pay, signing a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense, only to vanish into the unknown. Imagine this shocking reality: an unprepared worker thrust into war's fury, dying within 10 days? The stark lack of training haunts every frame. Ponder the cruelty: did these migrants arrive as students or laborers, only to be handed contracts instead of rifles? Their guards glanced away, whispers of fabricated assent filling the air. Sensory overload hits: the grit of unwashed boots in cold mud,
the acrid stench of gunpowder lingering like regret. No drills, no warnings, just plunged into hell's core in Donetsk, on that lethal front line near Pokrovsk. Wind howled through shattered trees, carrying distant booms and cries. His friend's fate? Listed as missing now. The narrator's voice cracked, recalling how 5 others met the same doom. Why detail the Pokrovsk front's deadliness if not from grim proximity? Heart pounds thinking of it, raw exposure to war's naked truth. Videos scream one truth: Russia exploits this army of workers, turning labor force gaps into frontline voids. What dark deal fuels this? Geopolitics twisted as Putin courts Modi, visa pacts may be shielding human smuggling. Flashback to a crowded Mumbai slum, memory flooding with sizzling street food aromas, the crush of hopeful crowds dreaming of Russian riches. But reality shatters at distant rain soaking black earth, a young man's final grasp at mud-slick dirt. Kremlin's gains sting, defiant economy rebuilt through sanctions, thrifty recruits flooding battlefields. India's prize? Bargains on oil, diamonds, fertilizers from Putin. Yet accusations burn, lives forfeited in trenches, for a town unknown, without a glimmer of combat skill. American voices swell, claiming labor detours straight to slaughter. So, if geopolitics traffics lives, does Modi's silence seal more tragedies? Zupolny. Unexpected twist looms. Could this bargain ignite uprising, exposing Putin's facade? The devastating impact of Russia's new labor approach isn't just in the smoke billowing from factory chimneys. It's in where the money flows next. Traditionally, rubles paid to Russian workers circulated back into local stores, paid rents, and fueled the national economy. But now, every 100,000 rubles handed to Indian workers in places like Sverdlovsk or Ovo vanish instantly from the Russian market. This cash isn't spent in Moscow or St. Petersburg. Instead, it heads straight to Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. Russia is exporting its dwindling reserves abroad, throwing away millions under the guise of economic progress. This is a classic financial drain, an invisible hemorrhage that weakens the Kremlin's ability to control its economy. But there's something darker lurking behind this flow. Society itself is silently fracturing. For years, lingering propaganda painted an image of unity, a society fighting foreign enemies, protecting its cultural core. Today, a soldier returning from the front line sees something unsettling: neighborhoods filled with unfamiliar languages, alien customs. Russian traditions seem replaced by distant foreign influences. Fears and suspicions ignite. With recent terrorist attacks still fresh in minds, the uncontrolled opening of borders fuels anger among ultranationalist circles, pushing them to the brink. This strategy, bringing in foreign workers as a survival tactic, risks igniting internal chaos. Ethnic tensions simmer beneath the surface, threatening to explode. The situation isn't confined to Moscow's streets, it's spilling into diplomatic halls. Because this human flow might be pushing Putin into a corner he cannot escape from. It's all part of a larger picture. Russia's grip on dominance is unraveling. In his dealings with Indian Prime Minister Modi, Putin finds himself less in control. Now, he's being led, not leading. Why? Because Russia's war effort and industry now hinge entirely on whether Delhi continues to supply these workers. One phone call from Modi, and the entire Russian industrial engine could grind to a halt. The real twist? Behind the scenes, this immigration wave might be less about economic necessity and more about geopolitical blackmail. A fragile power trio built on reliance, where the fate of Russia's industry and soldiers depends on a foreign leader's decision. And the consequences of that dependence could forever reshape the future of a nation once considered unstoppable. The previous part highlights how India's Prime Minister Modi now holds significant leverage over Russia, with Putin's empire becoming increasingly dependent. The true power dynamic has shifted. Now, what if India suddenly pulls the plug? The entire Russian economy could simply grind to a halt. How long can Russia sustain this fragile dependency on a foreign partner's mercy? The illusion of Russian independence is crumbling under the weight of its own war machine. While Putin proclaims a battle for sovereignty against Western powers, the reality reveals a different picture: a nation tethered to Asian giants. The painful proof lies in the tragic toll on Indian lives fighting in Ukraine. According to the Indian Foreign Ministry, over 200 Indians joined the Russian military, at least 26 have lost their lives, 7 are still missing. The echoes of grief ripple through diplomatic channels. When Modi confronted Putin at the Kazan summit, demanding the swift return of their citizens, Putin was forced to agree. Yet, on the battlefield, desperation grows. Nearly 50 Indians are reportedly still trapped in the front lines, despite orders to release them. Imagine that, soldiers caught between order and chaos, vulnerable and abandoned. Putin now faces an agonizing choice: weaken his front line by withdraw or jeopardize the vital economic link with India. This dependency has transformed Russia into a subordinate actor, a vassal in its own game. The Kremlin's strength, once rooted in nationalism and military might, now wilts under diplomatic pressure. Russia no longer controls its own future, it bows to New Delhi's demands. The country's sovereignty erodes with each plane landing full of Indian workers, an invisible toll marking the loss of independence. For Putin, these Indian workers are more than laborers, they are the pillars supporting Russia's crumbling industry and the soldiers occupying Ukraine. Meanwhile, Modi's government appears to hold all the cards. How long before this silent shift reshapes entire nations? The true story hides behind the crowded streets of Moscow and the trenches in Ukraine, a story about a powerful empire quietly surrendering its future to foreign influence. Time will reveal whether Russia can regain its strength or if it has already lost its independence in a game of geopolitical chess. Putin has drastically reshaped Russia's future. By turning it into a low-cost labor hub for Asia, he sacrificed sovereignty and pride. His relentless focus on Ukraine blurred the lines of national identity, turning a proud nation into a pawn. The war's true cost isn't only on the battlefield, it's in the soul of Russia itself. The nation is losing its independence, its culture, its very sense of self. This isn't just a conflict, it's a transformation of a superpower into a shadow of what it once was. What do you believe this means for Russia's future? Will it ever reclaim its standing, or has it already been lost? The answers lie in the quiet, unseen sacrifices, those made in factories and trenches alike. The story of Russia's decline might someday be remembered as a tragic chapter of a once great empire turned dependent and divided. Imagine the beating heart of Moscow, Red Square, where ancient Kremlin walls once whispered of imperial might. But today, a startling transformation unfolds before those historic stones. Crowds of Indian men dance lively Bollywood moves, turning the square into a vibrant tourist spectacle. Yet, this wasn't just festive recreation. Headlines screamed that it masked Putin's desperate bid to replace the generation lost to Ukraine's conflict. And those scenes? Just the tip of a seismic iceberg. From bustling visa lines to cramped dorms, the evidence reveals Russia's workforce shifting dramatically, not just in factories, but in battlefields too. Shocking reports from France 24 claim some of these newcomers are funneled straight to Ukraine's edges. As India's leaders stay silent, Russia's crisis deepens. Will you uncover how this migration reshapes empires? Continuing from the vibrant yet deceptive dances in Red Square, we now delve into Putin's grand vision crumbling under the weight of imported labor. His dream of an expansive Russia no longer rests on native shoulders. Instead, foreign workers lured by high wages face grim fates on the front. The Kremlin bet everything, risking Russia's future generations and social core. That talk of sending 1 million laborers? No minor shift, it's a raw cry of breakdown and failure. Factory wheels spin relentlessly now. But the grip on machinery belongs to unfamiliar faces. Edges of conflict echo with gunfire. Yet, the hands-on weapons grow ever more distant from home. Has Putin pawned tomorrow for survival today? The legend of Russia's strength erodes into vulnerability. Reliant on outsiders and fading population. Dramatic irony hits, Russia saves itself by sending foreign youth to perilous roles. The war's toll exceeds currency, a hidden storm brews. Can the Kremlin see this unraveling, or does it choose blindness and despair? Frontlines falter, but so do economic veins and social ties, worn thin by this imposed remedy. Building on the escalating crisis where foreign hands fuel Russia's factories and defenses, we turn to the home front's tremor, economic undercurrents poisoning everything. This labor influx seems productive at first glance.
Chimneys puff smoke steadily.
But the real devastation lies in cash drains.
Wages to these workers vanish not here, but abroad. Each ruble slips through fingers, wired back to Mumbai, Delhi, or Bangalore.
The sharp scent of curry lingers in Moscow streets.
Shoes pile in dorm hallways, muddy from long travels. But finances evaporate instantly. Local markets feel the chill.
No more rubles buying groceries or paying rents.
Circulation halts. Russia's reserves hemorrhage overseas. What unforeseen twist awaits as reserves dwindle?
Prepare for a plot reveal that shakes the very ground. From what we've uncovered so far, India and Russia's uneasy alliance teeters on a precipice, with young migrants lured by promises of fortune, only to face the brutal realities of combat in unknown lands like Pokrovsk, where untrained hands clutch weapons in a frenzy of survival against overwhelming odds.
The blood-soaked mud clings to their boots, the distant echoes of gunfire ripping through the air, as families back home whisper prayers into silent nights. What hidden bargains has Putin struck with Modi, turning economic desperation into a graveyard bargain? But the true horror unfolds when every wage slips through Russia's grasp, vanishing into distant coffers, leaving the homeland starved of its own wealth. Shall we peek behind this curtain of exploitation?
Imagine the tale unfolding from joyous dances on Red Square, a vibrant circus of colors and rhythms masking a deeper storm.
Yet, here we stand, gazing into the unforgiving ditches of Donetsk, where despair coils like fog over shattered earth.
Putin's vision of an expansive Russia crumbles, propped not by native strength but by an imported legion, duped into servitude and slaughter. The Kremlin barters away its very soul, exchanging tomorrow's generations for a fleeting breath of survival amid the carnage.
This colossal shift of 1 million laborers isn't mere commerce, it's a scream of failure, a systemic crack widening under the weight of hubris.
Machinery hums in sweat-soaked halls, but the grips steering it belong to strangers from afar.
Weapons bark in chaos, yet the pulls on triggers echo foreign fears.
Russia mortgages its destiny for transient gains, morphing into a shadow reliant on others, its core twisted and diminished.
Witness this echo, sending others' offspring to feed the war's insatiable maw. War's toll transcends currency, a sinister plague infects the veins, economic and communal, as the Kremlin stumbles blind or indifferent.
Battles erode not just borders, but the silent streams of finance and unity, corroded by this foreign influx.
Now, tease out the wider tremors from this reckless throw of the dice on Russia's domestic soil.
The most crippling fallout isn't the belching fumes from steel mills, but the vanishing trails of funds igniting them. Before, the pay flowing to a homegrown laborer blanketed local aisles, settled debts in cozy flats, cycling through the nation's pulse. But dive deeper, what monstrous revelation awaits when dollars evaporate overseas?